Turn to Mark. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. And I'll try to get through this. Oh, my goodness. Look at how much time I got. None at all, hardly. That's all right. Until now, here's what's happened throughout this thing. Jesus has been with his disciples. He's called his disciples. And what's happened is one by one, we've seen miracles happen. We've seen people that have had demon possession, and they've been freed. We've had people that had been, there was a paralytic who was freed of that. He was healed of paralysis. All these different miraculous things have happened to people, but they've all happened to those people. If you're one of the disciples, it's all happened to those people. None of that's happened to you. It's happened to them. And here's what you need to understand about faith. The disciples have not had a moment in their life where they have personally been healed by Jesus, or they have personally had a demon cast out of them. Everything is what they're seeing around them, okay? They have not experienced the power of God personally, and faith is not faith until you experience it personally, right? Faith needs to be something you experience for yourself, where you personally, God does something and changes your life. I was a sinner. I was demon-possessed. I was sick. I was lame. I was mute. I was deaf. I was that, and God did that to me, and now it's personal. None of that's happened to the disciples to this point. I mean, the only one that maybe is close would be Levi, because Levi had been a sinner and he had experienced this amazing grace of Jesus. He had been a tax collector and hung out with like the riffraff, and Jesus loved him anyway. That's the only one. And so let's dive in here and see what God does, because he's going to give an experience to them where all of a sudden now God is going to grab a hold of them and they're going to see the power firsthand, okay? See that saving power. It says in Mark chapter 4, verse 35 to 41, it says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?'" Not some faith. Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." What we need to understand is this is a continuation of this whole thing that's happened so far. So with his telling parables, he's been telling parables. Remember what happened, if you remember, if we go back a chapter, Jesus gets into a boat, right? Because the crowd is coming in on him, right? And they want to just touch Jesus' body, because if they touch his body, they'll be healed. That's like the MO on this guy. And so people are crowding in on him, and he says, "I got a plan. I'll get a boat, and I'll put it out in the water, and I'll have my own little barrier here of water because people won't going to get wet, and then I'll talk from there." And so he tells a parable about a sower. Really, it's about soil. He tells a couple other stories. But then it says here, it says when he's done with that, it says that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." He doesn't ever get out of the boat. Jesus never leaves the boat. He doesn't go get clothes. He doesn't go, get his Walkman. He doesn't go and get his cell phone. He doesn't get anything, right? He's in the boat, and he's done talking, and he says, "I'm done. I'm ready to be done. I need a break." There's a lot of people here. We need breaks sometimes, right? And sometimes we need breaks that aren't here with everybody here. "Hey, I'm taking a little bit of a break. Leave me alone." No, we need to pick up and go somewhere where nobody that we know is around. Sometimes you need to do that, right? Go on a vacation or something like that. Jesus says, "I'm going to pick up and I want to go to where all these people that are hounding me aren't at. We're going to go to the other side." Why are we going to the other side? Because no Jews want to go to the other side, because that's Gentile country. They never go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, because that's where all the Gentiles are. They don't even want to be caught dead there. So they're like, "I'll go over there because I don't care. As long as I've got a little bit of space and a little bit of time. Let's get in the boat." He says, and it says that they took him, what does it say? Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was. Just as he was. He didn't go get clothes, didn't get a suitcase, didn't get nothing. Just picked up and they just took off. They took him as he was. I like that. I like that. Not very many of us like to take Jesus as he is. I'll take Jesus the way I want him. I like most of the way you are, Jesus, but this thing you got about this particular sin or that particular sin, I'll take Jesus 92% of the way he is, right? But they just took him the way he is. Jesus, we're going. And it goes on and it says, let me just say this too. He doesn't say, it says, let's go to the other side. Jesus does not say, let's go to the middle of the lake and drown. You notice Jesus didn't say that? That's a really important point. Because if Jesus had said that, then as a disciple, you should be nervous and say, I don't like that. That's a bad thing because I don't want to drown today. Right? But that's not what he says. He says, let us go to the other side. Who initiates this entire trip? Jesus does. And Jesus tells them exactly what they're doing and where they're going. We are going to the other side of the lake. That's where we're going. Okay? Do you believe that Jesus has taken you to the other side of the lake or not? Did you hear him correctly? Maybe we didn't hear him right. Maybe Jesus said, I want you to head east. Jesus never said, I want you to head east. He said, I want you to take me to the other side of the lake. Right? We're going to the other side of the lake. He's giving you, his word says something. Do you believe his word or not? Okay? When he says, let's go to the other side of the lake, and then other stuff is going to happen here. Other stuff's going to happen, right? There's going to be storms. There's going to be a storm that comes. Jesus said, go to the other side of the lake. Well, I don't know. There's a whole lot of things that are going to happen here that might keep us from getting to the other side of the lake. Maybe he didn't really want us to go. Maybe he didn't mean it when he said we're going to the other side of the lake. Maybe he's got some other, maybe he lied to us and said we're going to the other side of the lake, but his idea was just to get us in the middle so that we die and drown. I don't trust Jesus. Now, let's keep going. Jesus said, we are going to the other side of the lake. Their journey is Jesus directed. Okay? So, if you're on this journey and your journey where you're going is you directed. Okay? If this whole thing of going to the other side of the lake was directed by the disciples, and they said, hey, Jesus, we got a great idea. Let's go to the other side of the lake. And then a storm shows up. That's a problem, okay? That's a problem. Because that wasn't Jesus' idea. We do that all the time. Hey, Jesus, I got a great idea. Hey, church, I got a great idea. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do this thing. But Jesus never said to do that. So Jesus, here's my idea. Oh, would you bless my idea? And now protect me through my idea. Jesus empowers that which he's in control of. That's not what happens here. Jesus is the one who directs it. He says what to do. And here's the first point I want you to get from this morning. We need not fear when our destination is directed by Jesus. Okay? You can put that in your notes. We need not fear when the destination, the direction we're going, is directed by Jesus. When Jesus is in front of us and we're watching him and we're following him because, you're leading, then we're good. We don't have to be afraid then. It's when we're following him and we go, oh, look, a squirrel, right? You're following him, oh, look, a rabbit. Oh, look, money. Oh, look, pleasure. When we're walking around and we're following Jesus, oh, look, and we go that direction. Now that's our idea, and now all bets are off. Okay? All bets are off. And this idea of whose idea was it, this is what we call in theological terms promise. In the Old Testament, we see it as promise. God tells the Israelites, I'm going to take you here. What is that? That is a promise. God makes promises to us through his word or through speaking to us in some way. And when he does, we listen and we say, I believe your promise. everything about the Christian faith, being a believer, everything about being a believer is based on this idea of promise and trusting God. You made a promise and you don't lie. You made a promise in the Garden of Eden that there would be a seed, okay? There would be a descendant of Eve or of the woman that would grow up that would save mankind. That's a promise that God made, and I trust that. I believe that. It's promise after promise after promise. And it says in here, it says there were also other boats with him. I don't know if you ever noticed that. There were other boats out there. It's not like Jesus is the only boat out there, right? There's other people in other boats, and they're just kind of wandering around out there. And so when this squall comes up, just being in the general location of where God's doing something can have an effect on you, right? Right? Just in the general, it starts storming. A storm comes up, a squall comes up, a major one. Now here's what's cool about this squall. It's so big. You guys know any fishermen? When I lived in Seattle, I knew quite a few fishermen. A buddy of mine worked at Trident Food, and he would be gone for maybe, 5 or 6 months out of the year, and he'd be on a boat, and they'd go up to Alaska. They were always in Alaska, and they were getting, like if you eat a Burger King, like fish sandwich, you're eating one of Trident's things that they got up in Alaska. But he would leave for all this time, and they would get storms. Man, we're talking nasty action stuff up there. It was great he actually led my junior high group when I was there, and he would get this boat back, and they'd have all this food on the boat that was left over that all the fishermen hadn't eaten, and so then we would take it out into the San Juan to that boat, and all the kids, all the junior hires, we'd eat the food and we'd swing off into the Puget Sound, and it was pretty fun. But he would take these boats, these guys that are on those boats, they don't get scared. They're not scared of storms. These guys have been in storms like this. They have them all the time in Alaska. They have them all the time in the middle. These guys that are in the Sea of Galilee, they have them all the time. These are normal, right? Because of the way the lake is set up and the way the hills come down to it. This is normal. Don't be nervous if you're on a boat and the captain's not nervous, okay? That's the way I usually say it. If the captain's not nervous, if you're on a boat and it's rocking all over the place and he's like over there like eating a sandwich and he's like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, then don't be nervous about it, right? If you're on an airplane and over the intercom you hear the pilot say, oh no, right? Get nervous. Right? Or if you're on the airplane and he goes, oh, I've never seen anything like this before, right? I was at the doctor's office. I cut my ear a few weeks ago. Doctor says, can I take a picture of that? And I said, take a picture of it. He goes, yeah, I've never seen anything like that before. I said, never seen anything like that before. People that are in there, these fishermen that are on this boat with Jesus, these guys are fishermen, most of them. Peter, James, John, Andrew, they're fishermen. They've been in these all the time. They're horrified. They're terrified. That's how bad this storm is. This is a really bad storm. Wow. And Jesus is sleeping. That's great. That's great. He's sleeping. What's scary is when you're going through a storm in your life. You can think of a storm that's in your life. Think of a storm that maybe you're going through one right now. And it's just, you look around and you're like, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get out of this with my reputation? How am I going to get out of this not going bankrupt? How am I going to get out of this without losing my family? How am I going to get out of this without how am I going to do this? And it's a storm, and you're like, how am I going to do this? And then the natural thing is, you're like, well, why are these bad things happening to me if God loves me? If God really loves me, and if God cares about me, then why are all these bad things happening to me? Why am I in the middle of a humongous storm? God is good. This storm is bad. And Jesus is sleeping. You're like, You ever been there? Right? You're going through something, it's just like, Jesus, you're sleeping. It seems like you're asleep. It seems like you don't care. And the natural thing is that we say then is we say, well, you must not care. You must not care about me. What do they say here? Let's look at what they say. He was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said, Teacher, don't you care? That's the issue. It's not Jesus, there's a big storm here. Calm the storm. The question is more relational. The question is not meteorological. It's not a matter of weather. The issue is, our problem is that you don't care about us. You don't care. And by saying, Jesus, you don't care, the response that Jesus is going to have to them is, you think I don't care because you don't have faith. That's his answer. You don't have faith. If you had faith, that would mean that you would trust the promise I made you. You would trust who I am. You would trust. And you wouldn't be saying that I don't care. You would know there's more to this than that. So the second thing I want us to do, if we're making a question, the very first one that we had is that we need not fear when our destination is directed by Jesus. Here's a second one. We need not fear when Jesus doesn't fear for us. When Jesus doesn't fear for us. If Jesus isn't afraid, right? If the captain of the ship isn't afraid, if he's not nervous for us, if it looks like Jesus is sleeping through it, right? Why am I afraid if Jesus isn't afraid? Sometimes in our house, there'll be stuff that's going on in our house. And sometimes as a kid, Cooper or might be nervous, or he might be frustrated or thinking, boy, are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to be able to do that? He doesn't know what's going to happen. I say, buddy, if I'm not afraid, if I'm okay, then don't worry about it, right? If daddy starts wigging out, right, and it's like, oh, man, then you might want to get nervous. But don't get nervous when I'm not nervous. As you're going through this and as you're on this journey, are you following Jesus? Is he directed you? And do you really think he's concerned about the place where you are? If you think that he is concerned about the situation, then it means that you probably are involved in some sin or something like that. But if you're like, I don't think Jesus is concerned about this, then don't be concerned about it. Don't be fearful about it. He told them, let's go to the other side. And here's the problem. They don't believe because they didn't believe Jesus' words. They just don't believe Jesus' words. That's why they don't have any faith. They don't believe his words. Their circumstances, this humongous storm, which would have scared anybody, right? I mean, some of the things that we go through as people that worry us, these storms, they can easily take our eye off Jesus, right? I know they do for me. I get overwhelmed by things, and I'm like, oh my goodness, and I'll try, but sometimes I'm looking around, I'm thinking, man, this is so big, and stuff's crashing down on you, and you don't know what you're going to do, and it's scary. It's a health issue, or it's a financial issue, or it's something that's coming down, and you can't figure out how you're going to get out of this, and so you start looking for stuff, and now you're up all night trying to figure out, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to fix this problem? And circumstances, they take our eyes off what Jesus said. But what we need to remember is that we need not fear. Here's our third one. We need not fear when Jesus is in our boat, okay? If Jesus is actually in our boat, then we don't need to fear, okay? So far we've got three of these, don't we? When we're looking at our situation, we say, I'm afraid. It's normal to get afraid. There are some things that you should be afraid of. Right? If a cobra comes in here and you're standing right there and I'd be nervous about that, right? Right? That makes sense, right? And you're like, okay, well, all right. But there are other things that just normal things. Do you trust God in the situation? We need not fear when God doesn't fear for us, and we need not fear when Jesus is in the boat, when his presence is with us. So the question is Christ in your boat? We used to sing this song when I was at summer camp at Camp Manitoqua, and it would go, with Christ in your boat, you can smile at the storm, smile at the storm, smile at the storm. With Christ in your boat, you can smile at the storm, sailing home. Great song. But it teaches this thing, with Christ in your boat. Is Christ in your boat? It says he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, quiet, be still. Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. This word that's used here for rebuke is the same word that's used when he's rebuking the demons. It's the exact same word he uses for rebuking the demons. Then he gets done rebuking the waves, and he turns around, and Jesus had, in the last thing, been rebuked. Jesus was rebuked by the disciples. You don't care about us. Okay? Here's a problem. If you ever rebuke Jesus, you're wrong. Okay? Don't rebuke Jesus. If you ever rebuke, that's just rule number 1, Christianity 101. If you are rebuking Jesus, you're the one that's wrong. Okay? They rebuke Jesus. Now Jesus rebukes them back and says, I can rebuke you just as good. Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Jesus answers this rebuke with a rebuke. If you rebuke Jesus, expect a rebuke back because you're the one that's wrong. It says, they were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him. And so they are ending with a question. They're confronted with this question. The question is this: who is Jesus? Faith comes down to this question: who is Jesus? The question they ask at the end is, who is this? Who is this guy Jesus? The wind and the waves obey him. The issue of their faith is directly related to who they think Jesus is. And up until now, they haven't had a personal experience with the power of God, and now they're like, oh my goodness. We were dead men here, and the waves and the wind, they obey this guy. They do whatever he wants. And so, how you answer that question determines how you deal with it. The last one, we need to fear storms. We need not fear storms because storms are subject to him. Is the storm that you're in right now subject to Jesus? Does Jesus have power and have control over the storm that you're in? I'm not going to answer that question for you. You've got to determine that. Do you think that Jesus, in the thing that you're in, has the power and has the control to quiet the wind that's blowing you right and left? Does he have the power to calm the waves in your life? Does he have the power to do that? If you believe he does, then you need not fear. Now, that doesn't mean you're excited about the process. I'm not saying you need to be excited about the process. But I want you to understand this about the storms. And I'll just give you an example. You guys ever heard of the biosphere? You know what a biosphere is? In Arizona, they built this big thing. It's called a biosphere. It was Biosphere 2 in Arizona. And it's this big complex. They were trying to create kind of the world, but all inside. So they would make it rain, and they would make the weather, and they did all this kind of stuff, and it was a perfect environment for them to be able to grow everything. And the idea is that someday they'll go to Mars, or they'll go to some other planet, and they've created basically a perfect environment where you can just have whatever you want, right? You can grow trees, you can grow everything, you got the right amount of oxygen, all this kind of stuff. So they started growing their trees in there when they first started. I don't know if you even heard this. They started growing the trees in there, and here's one of the major failures of the biosphere. They would grow trees, and the trees would get to, they'd get a certain height, and then they'd just collapse. The trees would collapse. They wouldn't fall over. They would fall apart and just collapse. And these scientists are scratching their head, and they're going, this is the perfect environment. There's nothing in this environment that would cause them to collapse like this. Then they realized they discovered something called I think they called it stress strengthening. In other words, if you go through life as a tree and you don't experience wind as you're growing up, If you're not bumped around, then you don't build up the strength that you need to be able to stand in your own power, right? You don't build that up. And so there was no wind in the biosphere. So they said, we've got to create artificial storms or artificial things that will cause these things to have to get stronger. And so God comes to us and He puts storms in our life on purpose. Do you think for a minute that Jesus didn't know this storm was coming? Do you think and I've heard all kinds of things. There are some theologians that say this was a demonic storm because Jesus rebuked it like you rebuked I don't think that at all. I don't think that at all. I think that Jesus knew there was going to be a storm. He might have caused this storm to come because He needed to test His disciples. He wanted to test them. He needed to shake them up a little bit. He needed them to be stressed. He needed them to get through this, because when you get over the storm, what happens when you're done with the storm? You're like, Jesus got me through the storm. Jesus got me. Boy, I don't know that I would have got through that storm. How did I get through that storm? There's only one way I got through that storm. Jesus woke up and fixed it. There's only one way. And now all of a sudden, I get into a next storm. So what happened the next time the disciples were taking Jesus to the other side and they're in the boat and a storm comes? Do they go, oh no, Jesus, wake up. You must not love us. No. You don't even hear about it. It never happens again. There's no recorded story here of Jesus a second time. What's part two? The next time they did the same thing? No. Because the next time they're like, it's Jesus. He's in our boat. He has the power over the wind and the waves. He's got the power over this. He's done this. And we experienced it personally. We didn't hear a story about some other guy who the wind and the wave were calmed when he was out on the water. This happened to us, and so now I'm stronger. And so we embrace the storm. We embrace the storm. Now, I'll be honest, I don't like going through the storm. I don't like it because I get nervous and I get scared. And I take everything I've got to point back to Jesus and say, Jesus, all right, my heart's beating fast, but you're in the boat. You're in the boat. All right, you're in the boat. You're in the boat. You directed me. You're the one who directed me. So here are the questions you ask as you enter the storm. We'll close with this. And would you mind coming on up and come on up here? We're going to close us up with a song here at the very end. Here are the questions you ask. When you're facing fear, ask yourself these 4 questions. Who sent you where you are? Who sent you to the place where you are right now? That should help you determine whether you should be scared or not scared. If you sent yourself there, or somebody other than Jesus sent you there, then you have every right to be afraid. Second, is Jesus afraid of where you are? Is He afraid that you're in a specific place? Is He nervous? He's like, oh man, that he shouldn't be there right now. Is that it, or is He fine with it? Ask yourself this question. Is Jesus present with you in the storm? Or is He like, hey, you're on your own, dog. You're on your own. Man, I ain't going in that storm. I didn't tell you to go in that storm. That doesn't mean Jesus won't come and rescue you. Some people are in a storm because they're Jonah, right? They're Jonah, and some people are in a storm because sometimes they're in a storm because God's testing you, and I need to know whether you need to know whether you'll follow me, and you need to know. Is your storm subject to Him? Does He have control over the storm that you're in? Is the storm subject to Him? Does He have the power over that storm that you're in? Ask yourself that. Ask yourself that. And then take the assurance of knowing, I have assurance. I'm not afraid. I have assurance. Blessed assurance. God, we pray and thank You for how You take us through storms. But You don't leave us there. God, You direct us sometimes into storms. Sometimes you're in the boat. It may look like you're asleep, but you're in the boat, God, and You just want us to trust You. God, but You have good things God, use these storms to strengthen us so that the next time we don't fear. God, we trust and we love you. Thank you in Jesus' name.
I walked under the blood-red moon, and I've seen those wolves gather round, and I've spent some time